There's something dangerous about growing in front of people who expected you to stay small, something threatening about becoming the person they only ever dreamed of being. And when that happens, don't expect applause. Expect whispers, expect side eyes, expect silence when you shine and thunder when you stumble, because jealous people don't confront you, they don't challenge you, they don't compete with you, they speak in codes, they lace their envy with concern, they stab with compliments that leave you bleeding. And if you listen closely, really closely, you'll start to hear the same words on repeat. Words that sound sweet, but are meant to shrink you. Words that sound wise, but are meant to warn others about you. Stay with me, because by the end of this speech, you'll know exactly how to recognize them, how to rise above them, and most importantly, how to never become one of them. They don't always say it with cruelty. Sometimes it comes wrapped in concern, coded in a soft voice that wants to sound like care. Other times it's said like an accusation, as if you've committed a crime by becoming who you were meant to be. But whether it's whispered with disappointment or spoken with disdain, those two words carry weight. And make no mistake, they are meant to pull you back down to the place where they last felt taller than you. The moment someone says, "You've changed," your soul should sit up, because most of the time they're not pointing out a flaw, they're revealing their fear. It isn't that you've become someone worse, it's that you've become someone different than what they needed you to be for their comfort. You see, when you grow, when you stretch, when you heal, you break invisible contracts with people who depended on your brokenness to feel whole. You disrupt the balance. You interrupt the script. And some people don't want a new version of you. They want the version they could manage, manipulate, or control. You've changed, is what they say when you no longer shrink to fit the spaces they made for you. When you stop calling just to be heard, stop over-explaining your worth, stop folding yourself up to keep the peace. When you begin to walk like someone who knows what they carry. They say it when your yes isn't easy anymore, when your no is firm, when your boundaries are no longer negotiable. It hurts, doesn't it, to outgrow people who once felt like home. But don't be fooled. What feels like rejection is often protection. Not everyone can go with you. Not everyone should. Elevation is a lonely road sometimes, and the higher you go, the more you see who was climbing with you and who was clinging to you, and there's a difference. Growth demands sacrifice. Sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's habits, and sometimes it's people. You're allowed to change. You were made to. Nature itself teaches us this. Trees shed their leaves, rivers change their course. Butterflies leave behind the shell of the creature they used to be. Imagine a butterfly apologizing to the caterpillars for growing wings. Imagine a river asking the rocks for permission to keep flowing. You were not born to stay the same. But here's what they won't tell you: changing costs. Not just to you, but to the image others had of you. See, when people are used to you being silent, your voice sounds aggressive. When they're used to you staying, your departure feels like betrayal. When they've benefited from your confusion, your clarity becomes their problem. And still, you must change, because you've tasted the bitterness of playing small. You've tried to be what everyone needed, only to lose yourself in the process. You've been praised for being humble, when really you were just afraid. Praise for being selfless, when you were just self-abandoning, no more. There's a version of you now that moves with purpose, that speaks with intention, that loves without leaking, and they may not like it. That's okay, because every time you evolve, someone will mislabel your progress. They'll call you fake, selfish, Hollywood, changed. Wear it like a badge, because if you stayed the same just to be liked, you'd be betraying the very reason you were given breath. Growth is holy. Growth is sacred. It's the proof that you survived what tried to stunt you. It's the evidence that the story didn't end where others expected it to. You changed because you had to. Because staying where you were would have killed something in you, your joy, your peace, your sense of self. You changed because you got tired of shrinking, tired of waiting, tired of needing validation from those who couldn't see your value. You changed because growth became more urgent than approval, because the pain of transformation finally became less than the pain of staying stuck. And if they can't celebrate that, let them. Let them misunderstand you. Let them misquote you. Let them say what they must to feel okay about staying exactly where they are. But don't you dare apologize for changing. Don't you dare look back and try to prove you're still the same. You are not. And that is the point. The people who love you, who really see you, will not be offended by your evolution. They won't guilt trip you into returning to an outdated version of yourself. They won't ask you to pretend, to shrink, to silence your truth just so they can feel taller. Real love makes room for growth. Real friendship adjusts to the new. Real connection evolves with you. So when someone looks at you and says, "You've changed," smile. Not a smug smile, a knowing one. Because what they see is only the surface. The new clothes, the new boundaries, the silence where you once begged. But what they don't see is the wilderness you walked through to get here, the nights you wanted to give up, the times you bit your tongue, the moments you lost yourself trying to be enough, the prayers, the journaling, the therapy, the war in your mind, the war in your heart. You've changed, yes, but not just because of time, not just because of age. You've changed because you chose to heal. You chose to evolve. You chose to believe you were worth more than what you settled for. And that, beloved, is not a flaw. That is a triumph. Let the words come. You've changed. Let them come. You didn't change to hurt anyone. You changed to finally love yourself, and that is nothing to apologize for. 3 words that slither into the room wearing a smile. They're not loud, not dramatic, but they sting. They're tossed into the air like a joke, dressed up in humor to mask what's really there. Envy. Not admiration, not curiosity, not celebration, but a quiet resentment wrapped in sarcasm. You've heard it. Maybe it came after you talked about a promotion, a trip, a new opportunity. Maybe you were just living out loud, loving yourself, walking with peace, building a better life. And someone, eyes full of things they never said, muttered, "Must be nice." It's never really about what you have. It's about how what you have makes them feel about themselves. That's the core of jealousy. It's rarely about you. You just became the mirror they didn't ask to look into. Must be nice is not a compliment. It's a coded complaint, a jab disguised as jest. It's how bitter hearts try to balance the scales by minimizing your effort and maximizing their sense of injustice. It says, "You didn't earn this. It just happened to you." It says, "I could have that too if the world had been as kind to me." But what they don't see, what they refuse to see, is the price you paid for what you now carry. The late nights, the early mornings, the doubts, the debts, the loneliness, the leaps of faith, the grinding silence of doing the work while no one clapped for you. That's the part they ignore. That's the story they skip. Because must be nice lets them off the hook. It gives them a reason not to look at their own choices, their own excuses, their own resistance to growth. If your success is just luck, then they don't have to change anything. They don't have to try. They can sit in the same chair, in the same cycle, with the same mindset, and blame the universe for not choosing them. But the universe doesn't hand out destiny like candy. It responds to alignment. It moves for the courageous. It opens doors to those who knock, even when their hands are shaking. And you didn't just get here. You built this. You bled for this. You believed for this. And still, when you rise, they'll look you in the eye and say, "Must be nice," as if it wasn't necessary for you to go through everything you did just to survive. There's nothing nice about climbing your way out of heartbreak. Nothing nice about breaking generational patterns alone. Nothing nice about choosing growth when staying broken would have been easier. But people don't see that. They see the smile, not the struggle, the shine, not the scars. You bought a car? Must be nice. You started a business? Must be nice. You're finally in love? Must be nice. You're at peace? Must be nice. They say it like it came in a box, like someone handed it to you, like blessings just rained down without planting seeds. But here's what you know deep down. You worked, and not just in ways that people can see. You worked on your mindset, on your faith, on your self-worth. You chose to stop asking for permission to live. You chose to rise when the weight of the world begged you to stay down. You made decisions that cost you comfort, connection, even companionship. You said yes to things that terrified you. You said no to things you used to need. That's not nice. That's sacred. That's earned. That's divine obedience and daily discipline. But insecure people never acknowledge your effort. It's safer for them to believe you're lucky than to admit you're relentless. If they say she worked hard, then they have to ask why they didn't. So instead, they pat you on the head with empty words. Must be nice. They say it like a joke, but make no mistake, there's a war in their heart between who they are and who they know they could be. And when someone hasn't yet chosen to heal, to grow, to build, they will always resent the one who has. Not because you did anything to them, but because you remind them of what's possible. And that's threatening. You see, mediocrity loves company. Insecure souls like things predictable, comfortable, small. And your ambition, your joy, your refusal to settle, disrupt that. You become a living contradiction, proof that something better exists. And instead of being inspired, they get bitter. Because now they have to choose, do I stay here or rise too? But here's what you must remember. That is not your burden to carry. You don't have to defend your blessings. You don't have to explain your success. You don't have to apologize for receiving what you worked for, prayed for, and bled for. Your life is not a punchline. It's a testimony. Let them say what they say. Because people will always have something to say when they witness someone stepping fully into their power. They won't tell your story right. They'll leave out the pain, the process, the prayers. They'll water it down so they can swallow it more easily. And they'll keep saying, must be nice, until they realize that nothing about your life came without a cost. You chose this path. You fought for it. And it's not your job to make others comfortable with your light. Keep shining anyway. Keep building anyway. Let your life be a contradiction to everything they said was impossible. Let your joy offend those who gave up on theirs. Let your peace provoke questions. Let your progress be the reminder that change is not only possible, it's promised to those who keep showing up. So the next time someone looks at your life and says, must be nice, you don't need to argue. You don't need to correct them. Just smile. Because deep down, they don't really mean must be nice. They mean, I wish it was me. And the truth, it still can be. But that's a decision they'll have to make, and a journey they'll have to walk, just like you did. It rolls off the tongue with a sigh, a half smile, a knowing glance. It's meant to sound sweet, harmless even. But inside those two words lives a deep refusal to recognize the mountain you climbed. You're lucky, is what people say when they want to erase your effort, your discipline, your tears. It's how they make peace with the fact that they stood still while you kept walking. It's how they protect their pride by pretending your progress was placed in your lap by fate. But here's what most won't say out loud. It's easier to believe in luck than to admit someone chose to grow, to sacrifice, to struggle, to say no when it was easier to say yes, to stay when quitting would have been justified. They say you're lucky because it's painful to admit they had the same 24 hours, the same opportunities to choose better, and they didn't. You didn't wait for a miracle. You became one. But they don't talk about that. They don't mention the nights you cried and still showed up the next day. They don't mention how you got tired of your own excuses and changed your life from the inside out. They don't talk about how many times you doubted yourself, how many rooms you sat in where no one clapped, how many times you chose to try again anyway. They only see the fruit, never the planting, never the watering, never the waiting, so they label your harvest as luck. Luck didn't make you get back up after failure. Luck didn't give you discipline when no one was watching. Luck didn't say, keep going when you felt forgotten, overlooked, and exhausted. That was you. That was your will, your hunger, your vision, your fight. And still, they'll look at your joy, your growth, your wins, and say, you're lucky. You started your own business? You're lucky. You got married to someone who honors you? You're lucky. You found peace after years of struggle? You're lucky. No, beloved. You're free. And freedom isn't handed out, it's fought for. But here's the hidden truth about why they say it. If your story is about luck, then they don't have to change their own. If your breakthrough is just good fortune, then they can sit safely in their comfort. Luck removes accountability. It turns your results into a fantasy instead of a reflection of your choices. It lets them off the hook. Because if you aren't lucky, if you really earned what you have, then what's stopping them? And that's a dangerous question. So they label it luck so they don't have to confront the gap between where they are and where they could be. They minimize your rise so they don't have to face their own resistance. But you know the truth. You remember the version of yourself who almost gave up, who nearly settled, who lived in fear, who didn't know they were worthy of more. And you remember what it took to become this version, the one who dares, the one who tries, the one who no longer apologizes for blooming. Luck is being at the right place at the right time, but success is being prepared when the door opens. You made yourself ready, you studied, you healed, you listened to your soul, you closed the gap between your current life and your highest calling. That's not luck, that's alignment, that's inner work, that's waking up when others were still sleeping on themselves. So let them say what they want. Let them call it luck. Let them romanticize your outcome because they can't stomach your journey. But you know, and the ones who really see, you know. You were not handed anything. You took the long way. You bled for it. You waited for it. You walked alone for it. You said no to easy roads, cheap applause, shallow validation. You earned your rest. You earned your peace. You earned the light that now follows you into every room. You're not lucky. You're chosen by your own willingness to do the work. You're not lucky. You're courageous because you stepped into the fire when others ran from the heat. You're not lucky. You're faithful to your vision, your calling, your voice. And people will always find ways to dismiss what they're not ready to pursue. It's easier to say you're lucky than to say you inspire me, but I haven't moved yet. That's not your burden to carry. Your only job is to keep rising, keep shining, keep building, not in arrogance, but in honor, not for approval, but from purpose. You don't owe anyone a watered-down version of your testimony just because they're uncomfortable with your transformation. So the next time someone shrugs and says, "You're lucky," just smile. They don't know the full story. And even if you told it to them, they still might not believe. Because it's easier to envy a miracle than to become one. It sounds wise, it sounds like love, it sounds like humility dressed in words. But sometimes, it's not about reminding you of your roots. It's about keeping you in your place. You hear it most often when you've outgrown the box they built for you, when you've evolved past the role you used to play, when your wings start brushing against the ceilings that once held you down. That's when the voices come, not to cheer, not to honor, but to check you. Don't forget where you came from, as if success is betrayal, as if healing is abandonment, as if walking in your power means you've suddenly erased your past. That phrase isn't always spoken from love. Often it's resistance in disguise. It's fear dressed as nostalgia. It's envy trying to sound like advice. Because here's what they don't say. Sometimes where you came from was survival. Pain, struggle, silence. And just because you were born in it doesn't mean you owe it your future. You can love the people, honor the culture, respect the soil, and still refuse to be buried in it. You don't have to prove your loyalty by staying small. You don't have to keep struggling just to make others feel comfortable with your glow. And yet, the moment you start speaking differently, walking differently, dreaming differently, they'll say it. Don't forget where you came from, like a rope around your ankle trying to pull you back. But forgetting isn't the issue. You remember the nights without sleep, the rooms where you had to swallow your opinions, the jobs that took everything and gave nothing, the hunger for something more. You haven't forgotten, you just decided not to stay there. And that decision scares people. Because if you can leave, evolve, rise, then what's stopping them? So they make your transformation look like treason. They call you too good, too changed, too different. And instead of celebrating your growth, they question your identity. But who told them that where you started must also be where you finish? Who told them that progress equals disrespect? You are allowed to grow beyond the places that formed you. You are allowed to upgrade your life without needing to prove you still belong to the past. You can walk boldly into rooms your ancestors prayed for and still carry their spirit inside you. You can move in elegance and ease and still be made of the same strength that got you through the storms. The problem is, people confuse movement with rejection. But just because you moved on doesn't mean you threw anyone away. You simply chose to stop setting yourself on fire to keep the old circle warm. Growth feels like abandonment to those who were never willing to grow with you. It feels like arrogance to those who never made it past fear. It feels like betrayal to those who were more loyal to your brokenness than your becoming. But listen closely. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your elevation. The ones who truly understand where you came from will be proud of how far you've come. They'll recognize your wins as a reflection of your roots, not a rejection of them. They won't shrink you when you shine. They won't guilt you when you glow. They'll clap with both hands and eyes full of joy, not suspicion. You are not here to stay trapped in the first chapter. You are the evidence that growth is possible, that healing is holy, that rising doesn't require forgetting, it requires integrating. You can carry your story without being crushed by it. You can be thankful for the foundation without being chained to the floor. Let them say what they will. Let them whisper that you've changed. Let them mumble that you've moved on. You know who you are. You know the ground that raised you, the fire that shaped you, the prayers that kept you. You've never forgotten. You just remembered yourself too, and that remembering made you move. So when they look at your new joy, your peace, your presence, and they say, don't forget where you came from, lift your head and smile, because you didn't forget. You just refused to live there forever. You honored the lessons, but you answered the call. And if where you came from can't hold where you're going, that's not disloyalty, that's destiny. They won't always say it with words. Sometimes it's a tone, a pause, a stare that lingers a little too long after you've spoken your truth. Sometimes it's laughter that isn't laughter, or silence that weighs heavier than words ever could. But then one day, when your light stretches too far or your confidence settles too deep, someone says it out loud. You think you're better than everyone. It's not a question, it's a sentence meant to shrink you, to remind you that you once needed their approval, their comfort, their covering. It's meant to plant doubt in your soul, to make you second guess your strength, to make you go back to that smaller version of you, the one who dimmed your voice to keep the peace. But what they really mean is you no longer need them to feel complete. You no longer beg to belong. You're no longer asking for permission to grow, to rise, to believe in who you've become. And that unsettles people, because when you stop needing validation, you start revealing who was depending on your silence to feel important. Confidence offends the insecure. Your posture, your poise, your peace. It shines a light on everything they're still running from in themselves. You've stopped apologizing for your presence. You've stopped watering down your truth to avoid making waves. You walk into rooms now with no explanation, no performance, no fear. And that boldness, that knowing makes some people uncomfortable. Because people are used to you uncertain. They're used to you second-guessing yourself. They're used to the version of you who played small to make others feel big. And now that you've stepped into your power, they call it pride. But they confuse your healing for arrogance, your boundaries for distance, your clarity for ego. They mistake your glow for attitude because they're not used to someone shining from within instead of begging for spotlight. You don't think you're better than anyone. You've simply stopped thinking you're less. That's the real issue. You're not looking down on others. You just stopped looking down on yourself. You started speaking life into your dreams. You started walking like someone who survived things that tried to destroy you. You started loving yourself out loud. And that kind of self-honor feels like rebellion to people who never learned how to do it. They wanted you to rise, but not that high. They wanted you to grow, but not past them. They wanted you healed, but not whole. So when they say, you think you're better than everyone, what they mean is you stopped playing a part in their comfort zone. And it's not your job to return to the version of yourself that made others feel safe. You are not responsible for other people's insecurities. You don't have to prove your humility to those who confuse silence with virtue. You don't have to dull your gifts to appease the crowd. You were not given your voice, your vision, your victory just to blend in. You were born to stand up, to stand tall, to stand true. And some people can't handle the echo of your presence because it reminds them of the silence in their own lives. So let them talk. Let them point. Let them roll their eyes. You know your heart. You know your path. You know the nights you prayed for this peace. The days you worked for this joy. You know the tears that watered your confidence. You didn't become this version of yourself overnight. You birthed it through pain, through surrender, through trial and truth. You didn't arrive here to explain yourself to those who never even asked about your becoming. You didn't rise just to tiptoe around people who chose to stay grounded. You didn't heal just to return to the wounds you outgrew. You walk with grace. You walk with wisdom. You walk with the weight of everything you've overcome. And that walk intimidates those who have yet to start theirs. So no, you don't think you're better than everyone. You've just decided not to pretend you're less than you are. And if that offends someone, that's not your burden to carry. Not everyone likes you. They say it like a warning, like a prophecy, like a threat hanging in the air, meant to bring you down a few inches, meant to remind you that no matter how bright you shine, someone will always find a reason to shade you. But that's not news. That's not revelation. That's not something you just found out. You've known for a long time that you rub some people the wrong way just by being yourself. You've seen the side eyes. You've felt the energy shift when you walk into the room too sure, too joyful, too unapologetic. You've seen how people bond over their discomfort with your confidence, how silence becomes a language and distance becomes a decision. Not everyone likes you isn't a shock. What used to shake you now strengthens you. There was a time you bent over backward to be liked. You rounded your edges, dulled your voice, shrunk your dreams just to make people feel comfortable. You over-explained yourself. You laughed at things that weren't funny. You said yes when you wanted to scream no. You made yourself small so others wouldn't feel small beside you. And still, they didn't like you. Still, they talked. Still, they whispered your name with contempt in their mouths and confusion in their hearts. Because no matter how kind you were, how humble, how soft-spoken, they had already decided how they wanted to see you. And it had nothing to do with who you really are. So now when someone says, "Not everyone likes you," you nod. Because finally, you've made peace with the truth that used to haunt you. You were never meant to be everyone's cup of tea. You are too bold for some, too deep for others, too joyful for people who are committed to their pain, too authentic for those still wearing masks. Your presence reminds them of what they buried. Your voice wakes up what they silenced. And your freedom, oh, your freedom, it stirs something in people who have spent their lives caged. Not everyone likes you is not an insult. It's a sign you've stopped living for applause. It means you've started choosing peace over people-pleasing, purpose over popularity, truth over trend. You've realized that being liked is not the highest goal, and it never was. Being liked can be bought, performed, manipulated. Being real, though, that costs you something, and the price is often the approval of those who only loved your mask. They don't like that you speak up now, that you say what you mean and mean what you say, that you don't perform pain for pity or fake humility to seem digestible. They don't like that your smile doesn't need permission anymore, that your joy isn't fragile, that your boundaries are firm, and your light doesn't dim itself to fit into broken spaces. They say, not everyone likes you like it's supposed to stop you. But it only shows you that you're living in alignment. Because when you finally choose truth, someone always walks away. When you finally choose yourself, someone always calls it selfish. When you finally grow, someone always mourns the version of you they could manipulate. And still, you grow. Still, you love yourself too much to play small again. Still, you walk into rooms knowing full well there will be whispers. And still, you walk tall. You no longer make yourself soft for people who bite. You no longer chase the ones who walked away the moment you needed to be understood. You bless them. You release them. But you don't beg them to return. Because you've learned being disliked doesn't mean you did something wrong. Sometimes it means you did something right. You set boundaries. You told the truth. You loved yourself. You stopped apologizing for your presence. You stopped showing up to places that didn't value you. You started choosing people who clap when you win, not just those who stick around when you lose. You chose to be whole, and that kind of wholeness offends people who thrive on your fractures. So let them not like you. Let them misunderstand you. Let them make you the villain in the story they tell to make peace with your growth. You're not here to manage anyone's discomfort. You're not here to entertain projections. You're not here to convince people of your worth. You are worthy, whether they see it or not, whether they clap or not, whether they stay or not. The ones who matter will recognize you. The ones who carry light will not be threatened by yours. And the ones who have done their own healing will not punish you for having done yours. So let "not everyone likes you" be the background noise to a life lived on purpose. Let it remind you that you finally stopped living on mute. Let it prove that you are no longer addicted to approval, because now, finally, you are free. Let them talk. Let them whisper. Let them roll their eyes and mumble behind your back. Because jealous people always say the same words, but powerful people don't have time to respond to echoes. You are not here to make everyone comfortable. You are not here to keep anyone secure in their stagnation. You are here to rise, to evolve, to glow without guilt. So let the jealous keep speaking, and you keep becoming.